Carl Jung. Why empaths attract people who secretly resent their light. Carl Jung. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered why your kindness, sensitivity, and open heart seem to attract not only admiration, but also envy, misunderstanding, or even quiet resentment? You're not alone, and you're not imagining it. In this video from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the deep psychological truth behind why empaths often draw in those who secretly feel threatened by their light. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious shapes more of our relationships than we realize, and the tension between empathy and shadow is more than personal, it's archetypal. As you listen, consider how this insight plays out in your own life. Can you recall a time when your presence changed a room? Leave a comment and share your experience. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs today. Let's begin this journey inward together. 1. Empaths mirror the shadow of others. Have you ever noticed how being genuine and open-hearted can sometimes bring out the worst in others? It's a paradox that many spiritually awakened men face, especially those who identify as empaths. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This isn't just philosophical, it's deeply practical, especially in a world that teaches men to be stoic, guarded, and emotionally numb. The truth is, when you're an empath, a man who feels deeply, who listens without judgment, who walks through life with a spiritual awareness and a tender strength, you're not just existing. You're reflecting. You're a mirror to the people around you, and what they see in that mirror can be both illuminating and terrifying. Empaths, by nature, don't just walk into a room. They shift the energy of it. Their presence, authentic, vulnerable, unfiltered, brings forth a kind of emotional contrast that forces others to confront what they've buried deep within. You may have noticed how your kindness unsettles people who are used to emotional distance, or how your calm presence disrupts those addicted to chaos. That's not a weakness. That's spiritual power. And yet, this same gift can become a source of quiet resentment from those who aren't ready to face their own shadow. When someone sees you standing comfortably in your light, owning your truth without the masks, they might feel threatened, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your existence challenges the false identities they've built. This dynamic isn't always conscious. That's why it's so dangerous. People may not even know why they pull away, criticize you behind your back, or try to make you question your worth. But at the root of it lies the simple fact: your spiritual light exposes their spiritual denial. Let's take this into modern life. Say you're at work, showing up consistently, not competing, but collaborating, offering empathy in meetings instead of domination. You're probably the guy people go to when they need clarity or calm. But have you ever noticed how certain colleagues, often the ones posturing the most confidence, seem to undermine or dismiss you without cause? Or maybe in relationships, you've been with women who said they wanted depth, only to later withdraw when your vulnerability got too real. That's not a sign you're broken. It's proof you're walking the path of a spiritual awakening. You've become a mirror that others don't always want to look into, because your emotional truth challenges their emotional avoidance. Jung would call this the shadow of the repressed parts of the psyche. And when your light touches someone else's shadow, it doesn't always bring gratitude. Sometimes It awakens resistance, envy, and projection. So what can you do? First, realize that this dynamic is not personal, but psychological and spiritual. Your job is not to shrink so that others can feel comfortable in their illusions. Your job is to continue to walk in integrity. Continue to demonstrate emotional intelligence. Continue to nurture your spiritual growth. The world needs more men who are willing to be whole, not just strong, but also tender. Not just providers, but guardians of presence and peace. And if you ever feel lonely because of your light, remember, stars are always lonelier when they are at the top of the sky. That doesn't mean they are lost. It means they are leading. So ask yourself, are you willing to continue to shine, even when others silently resent that shine? Because the men who choose to evolve, awaken, and live spiritually connected are the ones who will quietly change things. Comment below, I choose to change things too. The light of the empath both attracts and threatens. There's something both beautiful and burdensome about being an empath. You carry a kind of spiritual light, an authentic warmth, a deep understanding, a presence that soothes and heals. And that energy, it doesn't just go unnoticed. It's magnetic. People feel it even before you speak. It draws in the broken, the searching, the curious. But here's the paradox. While your light attracts, it also threatens. Not everyone who walks toward your radiance comes with love. Some are drawn in by something they don't even understand themselves. They feel the pull, but once they get too close, something within them starts to shift. Insecurities bubble up. Wounds they've buried begin to ache. And suddenly, your light isn't a gift, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, they don't like what they see. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. When they stand in the presence of someone deeply tuned into their own soul, someone walking a path of spiritual growth and authenticity, they're forced to confront the parts of themselves they've long ignored. You might be wondering why this keeps happening in your life. Why do you, someone who leads with kindness and seeks connection, so often find yourself entangled with those who subtly compete, criticize, or resent you? The answer lies in the light you carry. Your light doesn't just reveal truth in others, it amplifies it. And when someone isn't ready to face that truth, they project their discomfort onto you. Think of a friend who once celebrated your wins until your growth surpassed their comfort zone. Suddenly, the compliments stopped, the support faded, and passive-aggressive comments took their place. Their love for you never left, it just got buried beneath their own unresolved pain. In spiritual terms, your light disturbed their shadow. This isn't your fault. It's a spiritual pattern, and it plays out over and over again in the lives of empaths who walk with depth and clarity. Let me tell you a quick story. There was a man in his 40s named James, a soft-spoken teacher with a remarkable gift for sensing people's emotions. Colleagues and students loved him until he was promoted to a leadership role. That's when it started. The subtle coldness, the jokes at his expense, the questioning of his competence. You see, James never changed. What changed was how others felt when their own insecurities were reflected back to them by someone who wasn't pretending, who wasn't playing the game. His presence reminded them of how far they'd drifted from their own truth. James's story is not unique. If you're listening to this, chances are you've lived a version of it too. And it's not because you're flawed, it's because you're aligned. So here's the real question. How do you protect your spiritual light without dimming it? How do you keep giving without being drained by those who don't understand your gift? Have you ever felt the need to shrink, to downplay your joy or wisdom just to keep the peace? That's not spiritual humility, that's spiritual suppression. And it's time to stop doing that. You were never meant to be everyone's comfort zone. You were meant to be a catalyst. And sometimes, catalysts are misunderstood. But the lesson here is not to retreat into isolation. It's to develop discernment. Learn to recognize the difference between those who are drawn to your light because they seek healing, and those who are drawn because they crave what they haven't yet cultivated in themselves. Surround yourself with people who don't just see your light, but respect it, who reflects it. That's the space where true spiritual growth thrives. Ultimately, your gift of empathy is not a burden to be carried in silence, but a spiritual responsibility. You were born with the ability to feel deeply, and that is not weakness. It is strength. Yes, your light may be confusing to some, but never let that convince you that it should be hidden. The world does not need you to be smaller. It needs you whole. Let your spiritual presence remind people of what is possible when one chooses authenticity over approval. Because true spirituality is not about dimming your light to make others comfortable, but about shining in a way that calls them to rise. Comment below, I choose to shine. 3. Resentment is not personal, it's archetypal. When you, as an empath, encounter resentment from others, it's easy to take it personally after all. You've done nothing but show kindness, offer presence, and lead with your heart. But what if I told you that this resentment has little to do with you as an individual, and everything to do with something far deeper, something archetypal? Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This truth lies at the heart of why empaths often attract people who secretly, or even unknowingly, resent their light. You see, your light doesn't just illuminate the room, it also exposes the shadows. And those shadows aren't always ready to be seen. The resentment you experience is not a rejection of your essence, but a reaction from those who have not yet made peace with their own. When someone has repressed their pain, buried their truth, or denied their spiritual self for too long, encountering someone who is authentic, emotionally open, and spiritually awake can feel like a threat. It activates old wounds, stirs unhealed archetypes like the wounded inner child or the rejected self, and brings the unconscious discomfort bubbling to the surface. This is not about ego or character flaws, it's about spiritual wisdom. The empath becomes a mirror, unintentionally reflecting back everything the other person has tried to hide. And when a person is not ready to meet themselves, they may lash out at the very soul who helped them see. In that sense, their resentment is more about their inner struggle than it is about your light. So, ask yourself this. Have you ever noticed how some people pull away from you just as you begin to show them real compassion or insight? Why is it that your spiritual presence feels like too much for those still hiding from their own truth? Carl Jung taught us that the relationship between the self and the shadow is not a flaw. It's a foundational structure of the psyche. When that structure is out of balance, your light doesn't just shine, it disrupts. And disruption, even when divine, can be uncomfortable. Empaths, by simply being who they are, awaken parts of others that are not yet healed. This is why the resentment you feel is not truly about you. It's about the inner conflict your presence reveals. The next time you find yourself facing silent envy, unexplained coldness, or subtle sabotage, don't shrink or start questioning your worth. Recognize it for what it is, the spiritual tension between light and shadow. And let that awareness ground you, not break you. In truth, your energy is not just powerful, it's transformational. But not everyone is ready to transform. Some will resist, some will retreat, and some will resent. That is not your burden to carry. Your role as a bringer of light is not to convince or convert, but to be. Continue your path of spiritual awakening with courage and compassion, knowing that your light might be misunderstood, but it is never wasted. So what does this mean for you today? Perhaps it's time to stop apologizing for the brightness of your soul. Perhaps it's time to stop shrinking around those who fear their own growth. Can you honor your light even when it makes others uncomfortable? Can you stand tall in your authenticity even when it activates someone else's shadows? These are not just personal questions. They're spiritual invitations. And in accepting them, you deepen your journey into spiritual wisdom, self-respect, and the freedom to be wholly you. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 4. Empaths often carry the wounded healer archetype. There's something profoundly misunderstood about empaths, especially men who walk through the world carrying a quiet sensitivity that others mistake for weakness. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And that truth becomes glaringly clear when we explore the archetype of the wounded healer. Many empaths, perhaps including you, have endured emotional battles that left deep scars, childhood neglect, betrayal in relationships, or being shamed for feeling too much. But instead of becoming bitter, these men alchemize that pain into wisdom, developing a powerful sense of compassion that becomes their greatest strength. This is not just a personality trait. It is a spiritual gift born from survival, insight, and the courage to feel what others suppress. The wounded healer archetype, deeply rooted in both Jungian psychology and spiritual traditions, describes a person who heals others through the very pain they've once had to survive. But here's the paradox. That light you carry, the warmth, the empathy, the willingness to see the pain in others, often triggers something uncomfortable in people who have spent their lives running from their own shadows. Rather than feeling grateful for your presence, they begin to project their unresolved wounds onto you, dumping their emotional baggage or even resenting you without understanding why. This isn't about you being too sensitive. It's about them being too disconnected. And in modern life, especially for men expected to conform to stoicism without emotional depth, your light exposes what they've tried to bury. In spiritual awakening, this dynamic is more than psychological. It's energetic. You become a mirror, unintentionally forcing others to confront their unhealed selves. That's why empaths are often silently attacked, misunderstood, or manipulated by people who are drawn to their light but simultaneously threatened by it. You may notice this in the workplace, in relationships, even in friendships, where you're constantly the one listening, giving, supporting, yet left drained or guilt-tripped. The advice here isn't to stop being who you are. It's to become more aware of the sacred nature of your emotional intelligence. Protect your energy. Learn to discern between those who are genuinely receptive and those who seek you out as an emotional crutch. You don't need to carry every broken soul on your back. Spiritual growth means setting boundaries as an act of self-respect, not cruelty. As you awaken further, you will realize that being a healer does not mean being a martyr. Your journey is not about fixing others, but about standing in your own authenticity, radiating a solid spiritual presence, transforming without losing yourself in the process. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you honored your own healing as much as you do others? Listen, because the world needs more men who can feel deeply and still lead powerfully. That is your gift. That is your light. And that, my friend, is your responsibility. Comment below. I accept this wonderful gift. 5. Unhealed beliefs make empaths vulnerable. Have you ever asked yourself why, despite your kind heart and spiritual awareness, some people seem drawn to you only to later act cold, resentful, or even draining? If so, you're not alone. One of the biggest reasons empaths attract people who secretly resent their light is rooted in an unhealed belief many carry deep inside. The unconscious idea that their worth is tied to healing or fixing others. This belief, often formed in childhood through emotionally unstable or inconsistent environments, teaches the empath that love must be earned through self-sacrifice. And so, without even realizing it, they begin to equate being loved with being needed. But here's the trap. When your self-worth depends on being a savior, you unconsciously tolerate emotional exhaustion, ignore red flags, and overextend your energy trying to rescue people who may not want to be saved. This is not spirituality. It's spiritual bypassing masked as virtue. The desire to help others becomes a silent contract. If I heal you, maybe you'll love me. But in reality, what often happens is that those who receive this care begin to resent it, not because the empath did anything wrong, but because their very presence exposes what the other has been avoiding within themselves. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman in her 40s who had spent her entire adult life giving emotionally, financially, spiritually to every man she dated. She believed that if she just gave more, stayed longer, loved harder, she would finally be loved the way she yearned for. But instead of receiving love, she received emotional distance, manipulation, and subtle contempt. One day, during a therapy session, she broke down and said, "I don't understand why people either adore me or secretly hate me." And her therapist gently replied, "Because your light is a mirror, and not everyone is ready to see what's being reflected." That moment was the beginning of her spiritual growth. She realized that healing others could no longer come at the cost of abandoning herself. She didn't need to earn love, she needed to embody it. So let me ask you, are there places in your life where helping others has become a way to avoid helping yourself? Do you ever feel like you're betraying your own needs just to be accepted or stay connected? These are not small questions. They are invitations to look deeper into your patterns and to reclaim your energy from relationships that feed on your empathy without honoring your humanity. Because true spirituality is not about martyrdom, it's about alignment. And spiritual growth means learning to love without losing yourself. It means setting boundaries without guilt. It means realizing that your light doesn't have to be dimmed to make others feel safe. If you take one thing away from this, let it be this: you are not here to bleed for the world in order to prove your worth. You are here to shine so fully that your presence alone is healing, whether or not others choose to receive it. The lesson is simple yet profound. Your value does not lie in how much you carry for others. It lies in how fully you carry yourself. Now ask yourself, what would change in your life if you truly believed that? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. 6. Boundaries are essential for survival. In a world that often mistakes kindness for weakness, it is crucial for empaths to understand that spiritual wisdom is not about endlessly giving until you are empty. It's about knowing when to say no to preserve your inner light. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming who you truly are requires discernment, and that includes setting boundaries that are not made of stone, but of self-respect. You see, if you are an empath, your gift is your ability to feel deeply, to sense what others miss, to intuitively understand emotional undercurrents, but without clear energetic boundaries. This gift can quickly become your greatest vulnerability. Have you ever left a conversation feeling completely exhausted, like your soul had been siphoned? That's not random. It's because your energetic field is so open that others unconsciously pour their unprocessed emotions into your space. And here's the spiritual truth. When you don't know where you end and someone else begins, you start living their pain as if it were your own, abandoning your own needs in the process. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that the unconscious seeks expression, and if not given space, it will manifest in the form of projection. That means others may project their wounds onto you because your light reflects the parts of themselves they haven't yet faced. And without boundaries, you absorb those projections like a sponge. But boundaries are not selfish. They are self-honoring. Think of them as spiritual filters that let in love, but keep out chaos. You don't need to shut the world out. You just need to stop bleeding for people who would never offer you a bandage. So ask yourself this: where in your life are you overextending, giving too much, or allowing guilt to override your intuition? When did you last pause to ask if someone else's emergency was really your responsibility? This is where spiritual wisdom becomes survival. It's not about building walls to isolate, but about building clarity to protect. Boundaries allow you to love from a place of wholeness, not depletion. And as you grow in spiritual awareness, you begin to realize that the more you honor your energy, the less you attract those who seek to exploit it. Isn't it time to stop apologizing for needing space, peace, and protection? After all, you weren't created to be a container for unresolved trauma. You were created to be a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. And a lighthouse shines not by rushing to every drowning soul, but by standing firm and steady, even in the midst of storms. The lesson here is simple but profound. Your light is sacred, and if you want to keep it, you must learn to protect it. Comment below: "My light is sacred." 7. Resentment. often reflects unconscious envy. There's a powerful quote by Carl Jung that says, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And nowhere is this more true than in the quiet war waged against empaths, those who live from their heart, embody truth, and dare to be emotionally honest in a world that rewards armor over authenticity. Men, especially those of you who've walked through life with depth and integrity, have likely noticed this pattern. The more grounded and emotionally clear you become, the more resistance you attract, not from overt enemies, but from people who silently resent your light. This resentment, though often hidden behind sarcasm, avoidance, or passive aggression, is rarely about you. It's a reflection of an inner war waging inside them. The truth is, resentment often masks unconscious envy. When someone sees in you a kind of emotional freedom or spiritual clarity they haven't yet earned or have long abandoned, they don't know whether to admire you or tear you down. They won't say, "Teach me," or "How did you learn to be so calm in chaos?" Instead, they mock your peace, question your motives, or distance themselves, not realizing that their reaction is a mirror of their own unhealed story. And that is where spiritual awakening begins, not in escape, but in awareness. In the presence of an empath, others are often forced to confront the masks they wear. Your light exposes what they've buried. And in a society where masculinity is often defined by dominance rather than depth, a man who shows emotional availability can be deeply unsettling to those who still live behind walls. Now let's make this real. You've probably had a moment when your simple kindness was misinterpreted. You offered support without asking for anything in return, and yet someone accused you of being manipulative or having a hidden agenda. That wasn't about you. That was their projection. As Carl Jung taught, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. People project their hidden insecurities onto those who awaken their dormant potential. And for many, an empath feels like a spotlight on their shame, their apathy, their denial. It's easier for them to call you too sensitive than to admit they've forgotten how to feel. So what do you do with this awareness? First, you stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for your spiritual strength or watering down your compassion to make others comfortable. You continue your own spiritual awakening, not to prove anything, but to stay aligned with your core truth. And second, you let their resentment teach you something too, not about your flaws, but about their unmet longing. You're not here to heal everyone. You're here to embody wholeness so that those ready for their own awakening can find the courage to begin. And here's a question worth reflecting on. When someone resents your light, is it your responsibility to dim it, or their responsibility to deal with their shadow? The answer determines whether you continue to live in fear of your own light or step boldly into the role life is calling you to. And if you're hearing this right now, it's probably because your path is about more than just survival. It includes healing, guidance, and being steadfast in your spiritual presence. Because true power doesn't come naturally. And the more you commit to living fully as yourself, the more you realize that not everyone is ready to receive your light. But that doesn't mean you have to hide it. Just shine. The right people will show up to meet you. Comment below. I live committed to myself. 8. The path of the empath is to shine anyway. There comes a point in every empath's journey where they must decide whether to dim their light to make others comfortable or to stand tall in their authenticity and shine anyway. If you've ever felt like your presence stirs something in people, something unspoken, maybe even uncomfortable, you're not imagining it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for the empath, that journey is deeply spiritual. You're not just someone who feels deeply, you're someone whose very being becomes a mirror, a light, a spiritual force that reflects both the beauty and the unresolved wounds in others. And that light, as warm and healing as it is, can also be confronting. It can awaken parts in others that they have long buried, and that awakening doesn't always feel like gratitude. It often comes out as judgment, resentment, or distance. But here's what I want you to hear. That reaction has nothing to do with your worth. It's not a signal to shrink. It's a sign that your light is working. Let me tell you a story that might help this land for you. There was a man in his early 40s, a kind soul who had always gone out of his way to be gentle, encouraging, and open-hearted. He had this quiet strength, a presence that made people feel safe. But oddly enough, every time he entered a new workspace or group, he'd start to notice subtle shifts, co-workers pulling away, eye rolls behind his back, leaders who felt oddly threatened. He couldn't figure it out until someone close told him, "Your peace disrupts people who are used to chaos." And just like that, it clicked. His spiritual growth wasn't just for himself, it was affecting the room. His light was a reminder of what others weren't ready to face. Does that sound familiar to you? Have you ever noticed people acting cold or distant the moment you start to speak from a deeper place? What if their discomfort is actually a measure of how powerful your presence is, not a sign that you're doing anything wrong, but that your light is doing exactly what it's meant to do? See, spirituality isn't just about feeling peaceful. It's about growing into the kind of truth that makes hiding impossible. When you commit to spiritual growth, you start radiating authenticity, and that light makes people confront their own masks. Some will be inspired, others will retreat, but none of that should make you turn your light down. In fact, the path of the empath is to shine anyway, to walk with both humility and courage, knowing that your light is a gift, not a burden. You are not here to carry everyone's reaction. You are here to be a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. As you continue to evolve, your light becomes more than just comforting. It becomes catalytic. And in a world that's spiritually asleep, catalysts are often misunderstood first and only appreciated later. So here's the truth. Even when it's hard, even when people pull away, your role is to stand firm in your energy. Let your light be what it is, and trust that you're not alone. There is sacred strength in being who you are, even when it's inconvenient for others. So let me ask you this. Are you willing to keep shining even when it makes others uncomfortable? Are you willing to be the mirror that awakens rather than the mask that pleases? If you take anything from this, let it be this truth. Your spiritual growth is not just about healing. It's about embodying a frequency that challenges, that uplifts, and that dares to be seen. Don't shrink. You were never meant to. Keep going, keep growing, and keep choosing the light, even if you have to walk through the shadows to protect it. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. As we've explored today, empaths often attract hidden resentment, not because of weakness, but because their light stirs what others have yet to heal. Your compassion, presence, and authenticity can unintentionally trigger discomfort in those who have forgotten their own light, but that's not your burden to carry. Instead of shrinking, choose to stand tall in your truth. Let this be your daily practice, to honor your energy, trust your intuition, and walk with grace even when misunderstood. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to share your experience in the comments. Have you ever felt resented simply for being yourself? Let's continue this powerful conversation together. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at Spiritual Wisdom, where your light is always seen and celebrated. They love you, so why are they ignoring you? The Hidden Psychology, Carl Jung. So as we've explored today, love is not always straightforward. Sometimes, the deeper it goes, the more it triggers hidden fears and unresolved emotions in the other person. As Carl Jung taught, what we awaken in someone else's unconscious can cause them to pull away, not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed by what they feel. True love is not control, but a journey of mutual growth. If it's real, it will find its way back. Have you ever faced a situation like this? Share your story or insight in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a soul-stirring insight. 1. Love triggers the unconscious, not just the heart. Love, as Carl Jung warned, doesn't just stir the heart, it disturbs the soul. Especially for men between the ages of 30 and 65, who often carry decades of emotional conditioning, love can act as a spiritual awakening, not a comforting escape. Jung believed that true love doesn't just touch the surface of our desires, but drills deep into the psyche, unearthing unconscious fears, childhood wounds, and old emotional scars we thought we had buried long ago. When someone loves you deeply, truly, soulfully, it doesn't only activate longing or passion, it can shake the foundation of their emotional defenses. And in modern life, where men are expected to be strong, rational, and in control at all times, this sudden emotional upheaval can be terrifying. That's why a man who loves you may suddenly withdraw, ignore, or become cold, not out of indifference, but because the relationship has triggered something far more complex than just affection. It has touched his shadow, the hidden self that Jung described as the repository of everything we reject or repress. This is not rejection. This is psychological self-preservation. In today's world, where relationships are often reduced to text messages and short-term connections, the moment a deep, spiritual connection forms one that feels different, unfamiliar, and intense, it can push a man to retreat. The silence, the distance, the ignoring, these are not always signs that he doesn't care. They can be signs that he cares so much. He's terrified of what it awakens in him. That fear might come from early abandonment, a sense of inadequacy, or the unconscious belief that he doesn't deserve such love. As Jung emphasized, we don't just fall in love with a person, we fall into the projections of our psyche. We see parts of ourselves in the other person, including parts we've disowned or never learned to love. That's why spiritual relationships that awaken us can be so volatile. They force us to look at ourselves in a way that surface-level relationships never could. If you're experiencing this today, if someone you love is ignoring you without explanation, take a step back and consider the possibility that your presence in their life has stirred something unconscious and raw. This isn't a time to chase or demand clarity. It's a time to understand that spiritual love is not always soothing. It is often disruptive. It doesn't just want to make you feel good. It wants to make you whole. And wholeness requires that both people face their shadows. In this light, ignoring isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's a subconscious call for space to process a psychological storm. To the men listening, if you found yourself walking away from someone you love, sit with discomfort instead of running. Ask yourself what you're really afraid of. Is it her, or what she reflects back to you? And to those on the receiving end of that silence, know this: spiritual awakening rarely comes gently. It often arrives wrapped in confusion and silence. Don't take it personally. Take it as a sign that your love might be opening doors within them that have never been opened before. In a world addicted to instant gratification, true love remains a sacred interruption. It is not always neat, logical, or convenient, but it is always transformative. As Jung said, until you become conscious of the unconscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it destiny. Love, especially spiritual love, is one of the most powerful forces that can bring the unconscious into consciousness. And sometimes, the silence you hear is not an absence, but the soul processing something it never expected to find. Comment below. I listen to my inner voice. 2. Ignoring may be a defense mechanism, not rejection. When someone you care about begins to ignore you without warning, your first instinct might be to believe they've stopped loving you, that something about you pushed them away. But what if I told you that their silence could actually be a reflection of just how deeply they feel for you? In the world of spirituality and emotional psychology, this kind of withdrawal is often not a sign of rejection, but a sign of inner chaos. Carl Jung, the great analytical psychologist, taught that our shadow, the unconscious part of us we try to hide, can become activated in the presence of deep connection. When love touches a part of someone they haven't yet made peace with, it doesn't always feel like bliss. It can feel like a threat. This is when emotional avoidance becomes a subconscious tool for survival. Ignoring you may be the only way they know how to cope with the fear of losing control, of being seen too clearly, or of confronting parts of themselves they've kept buried. This behavior is not necessarily about you. It's about the intensity of the mirror you hold up to their soul. Let's bring this into a real-life situation. Have you ever had a moment when someone's kindness made you uncomfortable? Not because you didn't like it, but because you didn't know how to receive it. Maybe a friend offered you a level of affection or support you weren't used to, and instead of leaning in, you pulled away. It wasn't about them. It was about what their presence stirred within you. In the same way, someone ignoring you might actually be wrestling with their own unhealed wounds, fears of vulnerability, or past trauma that your love unintentionally awakens. Their silence is not a declaration that you're unworthy. It's a sign that they're overwhelmed by the emotional intensity. It's like standing in front of a spiritual mirror and seeing not only who they are, but who they're afraid to become. And when people aren't ready to grow, they retreat. So let me ask you, when someone pulls away from you, do you instantly personalize it? Or can you pause to consider what kind of inner battle they might be facing? Spiritual growth often demands that we don't take everything at face value. It teaches us to look deeper, to see silence not as a wall, but as a doorway into the unseen, into the soul's language of fear and transformation. That doesn't mean you should tolerate disrespect or emotional neglect, but it does mean you can start seeing the behavior through a lens of understanding rather than pain. Sometimes the one who ignores you is the one who is most afraid to lose you, because your presence challenges the identity they've built around not feeling enough. Ultimately, the lesson is this: not all silence is rejection. Some silences are a sign of an inner storm. If love opens someone's wound, healing it is not your job, but an invitation to grow spiritually. Learn to recognize when someone's withdrawal is due to their own struggles, not your values. By doing so, you not only protect your heart, but also expand your capacity for compassion and inner peace. That is the true power of spiritual growth. Learning to stay balanced, even when others are out of balance. Comment below. I choose spiritual growth. 3. Emotional intimacy awakens. Fear of vulnerability. When emotional intimacy begins to deepen, when someone starts to truly feel seen, known, and accepted for who they are not, for who they pretend to be, it can stir something unexpected. Fear. And not just any fear, but the fear of vulnerability. You see, the closer the emotional bond becomes, the more it threatens the protective walls people have built over a lifetime. For those who carry spiritual wounds, perhaps from abandonment in childhood, betrayal in past relationships, or rejection during formative years, being loved deeply doesn't always feel safe. It can actually feel like a loss of control. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In the realm of love, this rings especially true. People unconsciously push away what they most desire when it starts to awaken their most buried fears. This is where spiritual wisdom comes in, not just as knowledge, but as awareness. The kind of awareness that helps you recognize that when someone starts ignoring you, it might not mean they've stopped loving you. Instead, it could mean that your emotional closeness is triggering their unresolved pain, making them retreat as a form of self-protection. Have you ever felt like the more you opened your heart to someone, the more they began to pull away? If so, you're not alone, and you're not imagining things. This isn't a simple case of emotional detachment. It's often a subconscious defense mechanism. Many people believe that love is only about joy, warmth, and connection. But Carl Jung teaches us that love also exposes the shadow of the part of ourselves we hide, deny, or fear. When love gets close enough to shine a light on that shadow, some people panic. They might distance themselves, go silent, or even sabotage the relationship, not because they don't care, but because caring too much terrifies them. It's a paradox. They crave closeness, yet flee from it. They want to be held, yet they're terrified of being seen. And this internal contradiction creates confusing behavior that hurts not only you, but also themselves. So, what does this mean for you? It means don't rush to internalize their silence as rejection. Instead, ask yourself, What does this behavior reflect about their emotional wounds? Are they pulling away because they don't love you, or because they're overwhelmed by how deeply they do? In the world of spiritual wisdom, we learn that love is a mirror. It reflects not just beauty and harmony, but also hidden pain and unresolved trauma. And sometimes, when you reflect too much light, the other person isn't ready to face their own darkness. That's not your fault. It's just where they are on their journey. The question is, can you see their silence not as abandonment, but as a sign of inner conflict? And are you able to hold compassion without abandoning yourself in the process? Emotional intimacy is a gift, but not everyone is emotionally equipped to receive it. So before you chase the one who's ignoring you, pause and reflect, not just on their actions, but on the spiritual lessons behind them. After all, as Carl Jung taught us, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. What transformation is this moment asking of you? And how can you respond with both love and boundaries, compassion and wisdom? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. 4. The shadow self sabotages love unconsciously. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These powerful words from Carl Jung open the door to a deeper truth, one that many men overlook when love turns cold and silence replaces connection. You see, in relationships, especially those that stir deep emotions, the spiritual journey doesn't always look like peace and harmony. Sometimes, love activates hidden wounds buried so deeply in the unconscious that even the person experiencing them cannot understand their own reactions. When someone you love begins to ignore you, not with malice, but with quiet withdrawal, it's easy to internalize that as rejection, as if you're somehow not enough. But here's the spiritual wisdom that Jung left behind. What we repress does not vanish. It gets projected. In other words, their silence may not be about you at all. It may be their shadow, the denied, unacknowledged, and unloved parts of themselves rising to the surface in the presence of real love. And that kind of love is terrifying, not because it's harmful, but because it's honest. It shines a light on the parts of them that are still trapped in pain, shame, fear, or unresolved trauma. Your love becomes a mirror, and what they see reflected back isn't just affection. It's the parts of themselves they've tried to bury for decades. And so, they run. They ignore it. They retreat. But their avoidance isn't necessarily a lack of love. It's a reaction to an inner war. In modern life, this plays out more than we admit. A man might find the woman of his dreams, but the moment things feel real, he pulls away. Why? Because true intimacy is not just physical, it's spiritual. It triggers a spiritual awakening. And with that comes the confrontation of everything that has been left in the dark. The shadow self doesn't want to be seen, but love exposes it anyway. So what can you do? First, understand that being ignored in love is not always a personal failure. It may be a reflection of someone else's internal chaos, their fear of being vulnerable, or their resistance to transformation. Second, this is your invitation not to chase them, but to turn inward. What is their silence showing you about your own wounds, your own expectations, your own emotional patterns? Third, instead of clinging or reacting, hold space with dignity strength, and awareness. As Jung taught, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Let this be the moment you choose awakening over reaction, spiritual clarity over emotional chaos. Ask yourself, are you truly seeing them, or are you reacting to the absence of validation? And deeper still, are you at peace with your own presence when love feels distant? Real love requires us to meet ourselves fully before we can truly meet another. In their silence, you may find your own voice. In their withdrawal, you may discover your true power. The man who can sit with his pain without projecting it, he's the one who rises. He becomes grounded, spiritual, awake. So the next time someone pulls away from you, ask yourself, what part of their shadow did my light just touch? Because when love feels confusing, that's often when it's closest to the truth. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Your journey to stoic self-mastery and victory continues with each lesson. 5. Distance is sometimes a subconscious test of love. Sometimes, when someone loves you deeply, their first instinct is not to come closer, but to pull away. And while that may seem confusing, even painful, it often stems from something buried deep within their subconscious. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This couldn't be more true when it comes to love. Many people, without even realizing it, create distance not to abandon the relationship, but to test it. This is not a conscious or strategic decision. It's often a defense mechanism shaped by past wounds, attachment styles, and fears of vulnerability. They want to know, will you stay even when I'm not always available? Can this connection survive when I retreat into silence? It's a way to see if the relationship has roots that go deeper than daily reassurance. And while this silent test of love might feel cruel, it's a cry for emotional safety masked as withdrawal. Let's make this real with a story you might recognize in your own life. Think about someone who suddenly stopped replying to your texts, not out of anger, but out of nowhere. No fight, no warning. Maybe it was after an intense emotional moment. Perhaps you felt like things were finally getting closer, more intimate, more real, and then they disappeared. You waited, confused, wondering what went wrong. But what if nothing went wrong? What if their silence was a mirror of their inner chaos? What if their love for you triggered an old wound that told them, this will hurt you, run before it's too late? In a world where emotional survival has often meant shutting down, stepping back, or pretending not to care, this kind of distancing becomes a form of self-protection. It doesn't mean the love is fake. It often means the love is real and terrifying. Now, does that mean you should always wait for them to return? Not necessarily. Here's where spirituality and spiritual growth come into play. True spiritual growth invites you to understand the unseen forces behind human behavior, but it also teaches you to protect your energy, your peace, and your heart. You are not here to chase someone who is still running from their own soul. The healthiest kind of love is not proven by how much pain you can endure, but by how much peace it can bring to both people involved. So the next time someone pulls away, ask yourself, is this distance a reflection of their inner conflict or a lesson for me about my own worth? Can you hold space for their journey without abandoning your own? In the end, this hidden dynamic isn't about games. It's about fear. about wounds, about a heart unsure how to receive what it deeply desires. When someone tests love through silence, what they're really asking is it safe to be seen? Will I still be loved if I don't perform, explain, or show up perfectly? It's a shadowed plea for unconditional acceptance. But remember, your spiritual path is not just about understanding others, but also about standing in your truth. Love them, but don't lose yourself trying to prove your love. Real love should expand both souls, not shrink them. So let me ask you, have you ever felt like someone's silence was testing you? Did you stay, or did you grow from it? Share your experience below, because these are the real questions of the heart that lead us into the most profound spiritual awakening. 6. Your reaction should be rooted in self-awareness, not fear. When someone you care about suddenly begins to pull away or goes silent without explanation, your first instinct might be to panic, to overthink, or to chase after them for answers. But what if I told you that your reaction in those moments can reveal far more about your own inner world than theirs? Carl Jung, the great thinker of the unconscious, once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And that's the spiritual wisdom we must lean into when we're faced with emotional distance. Their silence may not be a reflection of your shortcomings. It could be a mirror reflecting their own unresolved battles. People often retreat when they feel emotionally overwhelmed, when love activates old wounds, or when they are confronted with parts of themselves they are not ready to face. So, if someone's absence is making you question your worth, pause and ask yourself, what wound is this silence touching in me? Is it abandonment, rejection, the fear of being unlovable? That reaction isn't something to suppress. It's an invitation to investigate. Spiritual awakening begins when we stop reacting out of fear and start responding with self-awareness. When you resist the urge to chase, to force clarity, or to beg for emotional breadcrumbs, you create space not just for them, but for yourself to understand what is truly happening beneath the surface. Because the truth is, not all distance is personal. Sometimes, people pull away not because you did something wrong, but because your presence activates something deep within them, something they're not ready to explore. And here's the hard part. You may never get the explanation you think you deserve. So the question is, what do you do with this silence? Do you let it break you or build you? In moments like this, spiritual wisdom teaches us to turn our focus inward, to be curious about our own emotional triggers rather than trying to decipher the confusion of others. Have you ever thought about how we often seek healing through the words of others, when what we really need is to listen to our inner voice? Carl Jung warned us that our shadow, the unconscious part that we deny or reject, often comes out in how we respond to rejection or ambiguity. So when someone disappears, that shadow becomes loud. But instead of running from it, what if we sat with it, understood it, and let it transform us? Because growth doesn't come from control. It comes from letting go, understanding, and being emotionally honest. The next time someone leaves you, instead of rushing to fill the void, try sitting down next to them. Let it teach you things that still need healing. Let it awaken your spiritual power. Ask yourself, what would it be like to choose peace over panic? You see, the biggest breakthroughs in love often don't happen when we cling, but when we let go with dignity, and with a deep commitment to our own emotional evolution. Comment below. I am committed to my feelings. 7. Real love evolves through awareness, not control. They say that real love doesn't chain you, it frees you. And in the words of Carl Jung, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. So let's talk about what that really means when someone you love starts ignoring you. Especially as a man in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or even 60s, this silence can feel confusing, even humiliating. You gave your heart, your presence, your effort, and now you're left with distance and questions. But what if that space isn't rejection? What if it's the exact environment required for spiritual awakening, for both you and them? Because real love is the kind that matters. The kind that endures isn't about control, manipulation, or clinging to someone until they bend to your will. It's about awareness. It's about growth. It's about creating the kind of connection that breathes, evolves, and allows both people to expand. Jung taught us that the greatest love helps us understand who we truly are. So when they walk away, the pain might actually be a portal, a signal that you are meant to evolve, not for them, but for yourself. This is spiritual maturity, knowing that if love is real, it will come back not because you chased it, but because both souls have transformed into new versions of themselves who can meet again on higher ground. And if it doesn't return, then it wasn't meant to survive the spiritual fire, and that's not a failure. That's a sacred lesson, a message that love must first deepen within yourself before it can flourish with another. So what does that look like in modern life? It means not sending that angry text when you feel ignored. It means choosing growth over reaction. It means building a life that's so fulfilling, so rooted in spiritual self-respect, that whether they come back or not, you've already won. You've already become the man you were supposed to be. So let me ask you, what would it look like if you saw silence not as abandonment, but as an invitation to expand your awareness, to reconnect with your values, to refine your purpose, to become someone whose love radiates from self-possession, not need? Because at the end of the day, that's the kind of man who doesn't just attract love, he sustains it. And when someone leaves, they remember him, not for how loud he shouted, but for how deeply he understood. That is the quiet power of spiritual wisdom. That is the real work. So if you're facing distance right now, don't just wait until you elevate. Do your inner work, embrace your shadow, walk through the pain, and transform it into strength. Love that evolves through pressure is temporary, but love that returns after spiritual transformation, that's eternal. What part of this message resonates with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how this has shaped your journey. So as we've explored today, love is not always straightforward. Sometimes, the deeper it goes, the more it triggers hidden fears and unresolved emotions in the other person. As Carl Jung taught, what we awaken in someone else's unconscious can cause them to pull away, not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed by what they feel. True love is not control, but a journey of mutual growth. If it's real, it will find its way back. Have you ever faced a situation like this? Share your story or insight in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And hit the notification bell so you never miss a soul-stirring insight.